Hello, my name is Rob, and welcome back to Directors Uncut. We are the podcast that puts filmmakers from all corners of the globe onto a huge list that covers everything from Soviet epics to New Zealand comedies. Then we pick from a huge bank of directors that chat about their work through 2 films. To do this, I am joined by a rotating cast of guest hosts. Today I am joined by Caitlyn, first time on the show.
Hello, yes it is. Hi.
Yes, Kat.
Hello again.
Faye.
Hello, thank you for having me, Rob.
Quite welcome. And Mike.
Hello, good to be back.
How are you all doing on this? This is dating the recording of this, but it's fine May afternoon. Nothing. Not good.
There's too many of us. We're all like, who goes first?
I'm adjusting to the sudden heat. That's what I'm into.
Not burnt out by all of the bank holidays at once. No sly dig at the monarchy. Nobody wants to have one of those. You got a free reign if you want one.
Well, I am currently fuming because my little one, she does squirrels, which I didn't realise was part of like the Scouts and stuff, which is apparently a very royalist society. And they've got a coronation event next week in their normal slot. But I've got to take my own picnic. The kid doesn't eat picnic food. It's, it's like, this is a diet. She's going to be there with like pretzels and that's it. Like,
surely the king should be providing you with a picnic basket.
Well, yeah, you'd think.
Although it's put their hand in their pocket.
Yeah. So I'm just like,
that's what you
want.
Yes, exactly. Not hiding anything.
I'll deliver. That's fine.
You live in London, Kat. You should turn up at Buckingham Palace and demand the food that you are owed.
No, I don't. When the Queen went, my mum was like, "Are you not going to go and queue?" No. Well, I would if I lived down there. It's like, yeah, but no, I've got better things to do with like 5 days of my life than stand in a queue. So, yes.
Would you do it for Keanu Reeves?
Well, I mean, I've already met him, so.
Everybody would. He seems like a totally genuine sweetheart who wouldn't do that for Keanu Reeves. I don't know if I can segue out of that, so let's not try. The director for this, which is the season finale of season 2, is Ben Wheatley. So let's just go through it in accordance of how people arrive. So, Caitlyn, what's your relationship with his movies? With his stuff, I guess. He's done a lot.
A complete obsession, I think, with some of my relationship with his films. I continue to write essays on them because for me they've all got a great rewatchability. So I find myself revisiting them all the time and finding new little things in there to obsess about.
There's his first Down Terrace to what's his most recent one?
Most likely Rebecca. Rebecca's before In the Earth. I think In the Earth is probably later, isn't it? Because
she's got I don't know when Meg 2 is out
this year.
This summer.
That's going to be surreal seeing him on that sort of large scale because he's a little indie British guy,
I cannot wait for Meg 2. That's going to be awesome.
Yeah,
I love it.
Kat, same question. Relationship with Ben Wheatley.
I am more of a casual fan of Ben Wheatley. I sort of accidentally watched a lot of his films before necessarily realising who he was. But I'm basically here to listen to Caitlyn and Faye talk about the guy.
No shame
no
there.
Pressure.
No shame. Faye then?
I mean, I'm on Caitlyn's level. I'm a Ben Wheatley obsessive. I came in after Down Terrace. I'm ashamed to say I first came in at Kill List, and it's been an out-of-control spiral since then.
We're having 2 obsessives on the pod.
Yeah.
Did you watch any of his TV stuff? Because I didn't realise he'd done so much TV comedy.
Yeah, I've seen bits of The Wrong Door, for sure.
Same, yeah.
He did a thing with Johnny Vegas as well, didn't he? I can't remember the name of that one. BBC Three. Yeah. Which is just such a weird idea. I think that the guy who directed Kill List also did that.
I think that it's quite a dark show, though. It's quite a dark version of a comedy.
It doesn't exist anymore now, though, does it? It's gone to the great sitcom Palace in the Sky or whatever analogy you want to work.
It has, but one of the upcoming projects for Ben Wheatley is an ideal movie.
Oh,
interesting.
That's a thing that we'll talk about because he still hasn't delivered on Freak Shift, and I'm not going to forgive him until he does, because you can't just drop that idea and then just saunter off into the sunset. You just can't. So, Mike, Ben Wheatley.
Yeah, I would consider myself a fan. I liked his Doctor Who episodes as well, because he directed a couple of Peter Capaldi ones, and they showed the first one in the cinemas for some reason. So that was actually quite fun to see. Like, oh, okay, this is fun to see. It might be that as one of the only ones I've seen of his in the cinema, actually, apart from In the Earth. Yeah, no, I consider myself a fan. I think the only one I haven't seen is Rebecca. I enjoyed the practicality he has. Approach he takes, where he's just sort of, it feels a bit no nonsense, just sort of gets on and does the job, but it's still producing interesting stuff.
Yeah, and it is his wife, isn't it, Amy Jump, that he writes with
and edits with? I think she's the editor usually, isn't she?
Yeah, they're a great combination, I think, that work together. Some directors could do with that sort of input, really, because it seems that on the director's commentary and interviews on Kill List, at least, that they seem to spend most of the writing phase just shouting at each other. But when it works, I guess. Okay, so that leads us to the two movies that we're going to be talking about tonight, which is, this feels like much longer ago than it actually is, but 2011's Kill List. And In the Air from 2021, I believe, right in the middle of the COVID pandemic. So we'll start with the earliest of the two, Kill List.
I just wanted to say thank you to Justin. His teachings have helped me put everything in perspective. I haven't had an anxiety attack in 3 weeks.
Don't listen to that. It's like a fucking worm boring through my skull. It's like a graveyard. And they still fucking plot up next to us.
I thought you could intersect with the group. Because when I saw you having trouble rationalising your emotional response to Duncan's departure.
Can't wait to see him rationalise your emotional response. Don't. I'm going to kill him, Gal. Don't kill him, mate. I am. I'm going to massacre that table of people now. In a hotel. And I ain't going to shoot them, Gal. I'm going to do them one at a time, or I'm doing them slow.
No butter now?
Yeah.
We should have a song. Okay, shall I get the old guitar?
Oh, fuck, here we go. You're expecting Jeremy Beadle, aren't you? But he's dead, he can't help it. He's not going to play that guitar in here, is he?
Christian soldiers marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before.
I even know this one.
And the sign of triumph.
Fucking happy bastards.
On them Christian soldiers.
You're giving me indigestion.
Oh, sorry.
Apology accepted.
Sometimes God's love can be hard to swallow.
Yeah, not as hard as a dinner plate.
God loves you.
Does he? Well, tell God from me, if you're the type of people he hangs about with, stay out of my way. No more guitar, mate. Not in restaurants. There's a time and a place. And your time and a place is in a very isolated location where no one's likely to be for about a fucking 100 years. Okay? Because Jimi Hendrix, you ain't.
This is a loaded thing I'm about to ask somebody, but what is the story of Kill List?
Caitlyn?
You can't just keep asking me. So, yeah, okay, let's launch. Kill List is centered around two hitmen who are given a mysterious list in which to identify and kill people. And that goes awry. I think that's an explanation of the plot.
Yeah.
Spoiler free.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of these movies where you kind of have to go into the spoilers because you'd be talking about it for 5 minutes if you didn't sort of dig into what actually happens.
Yeah.
It does evolve into a folk horror, and I think this is the fourth time around, and I still don't think I fully understand the mechanics of it.
I can see Faye's about to start.
I noticed the signs.
No, I was just going to say that the genius thing about Kill List is it is a folk horror whilst also being a gangster film. So for a large chunk of the film, you actually forget that you're watching a horror and you're concentrating on this gangster aspect of it. And it isn't until it rolls around to the end, you're like, oh, actually, this is what it's been leading to all along. So I think on maybe your first watch, it is easy to miss things, but the more you go back into it, the more it just makes sense and links together.
Yeah, there is a seeding involved in the whole thing. And it's one of those films you can almost play front to back and get a lot from it, which I think Dan Martin actually did in terms of
So well, first I think you described it as an experiment that probably it won't necessarily gain anything, but it's fun for him to do.
Yeah, it's sort of overlaying the film running backwards and then with the film running forwards, so you can pull out those scenes like where he's play sword fighting with his son versus the end a lot better. It sort of makes a lot of sense, and some of the things that pop up in that are quite weird. And I end up feeling like those people from Room 237, the kind of conspiracy documentary about The Shining, because I'm like, it's all there. But yeah, it's really fun.
Kat, you've been quiet so far. What's your feelings on Kill List? There's a lot to dig into there. But
so I remember the first time I watched it was rented, I think, through Love Film, back in the day when you got the old DVDs through the post and you didn't know what you were going to get. You put your priorities and you never got a high priority. You always got whatever was kicking around. And I remember it screened at Fright Fest and it had a ton of hype. I think it was Total Film sponsored screenings. So we sat down to watch it. And if I'm honest, I didn't get it the first time I watched it. I think that was because I missed the earlier folk horror things. And I was very much like, why did this gangster film suddenly, why is there suddenly these people in like masses of what's happening? But since then, on a rewatch and that, you do pick up the things. I mean, when I rewatched it recently, I completely forgot about the bit at the dinner party where the woman just like goes into the bathroom and starts like daubing symbols onto mirrors. Like, how did I not pick up on this the first time I was watching it? Like, was I out of the room? So it definitely is one of those films that does get better on a repeat viewing if you go in knowing nothing like I did.
Yeah. It's also one of these movies where you kind of realise where a lot of actors sort of started their, the quality side of their career, really. I mean, I can't speak for anybody else, but I think this is the movie where I at least fell in love with Michael Smiley.
Oh, yes.
Hey.
Yeah. The man is... Well, he's just loved. I mean, he's a hitman, and I know he kills people, but at the same time, he's just delightful in this, really, isn't he?
He's charming.
For me, Kill List started the trend of whenever you saw Michael Smiley in a film, you knew something was going down. Something wasn't right. And Kill List started that for me.
Yeah. Charmingly threatening and threateningly charming.
Yeah.
There's little bits of his comedy. He does a little like gag in the middle of it, doesn't he? But other than that, it's just this new persona he's really made for himself. An affable sort of guy in sort of horrible circumstances. There's like the scene with the, what is it? It's at a hotel and there's the religious group sort of playing songs.
that might be my favourite scene in the whole thing, because I think Neil Maskell is such a brilliant comic actor. Like, his timing is impeccable, and the fact that you've got then Michael Smiley sat there doing the undercutting little lines as well, it's perfect. What a scene.
Just giggling away. It's great.
Yeah.
So there's two questions really here. Does Kill List work as a gangster movie? Let's just assume it's just a gangster movie. Does it work on that level?
I think it works deeper than a gangster movie because it's, on the surface, it is a gangster film, but it's more about their relationship, and their relationship goes to some dark places. And I've not watched a lot of gangster films, but I know they are partial to that as well. Yeah. But it's I don't want to say elevated gangster because that makes me sound, you know how that makes me sound. But yeah, I think it goes deeper than that.
Yeah. Anybody else? Because it does function on two genres, so just the different genres it approaches, I guess.
From memory, Down Terrace felt more like a gangster film from my memory. But even then, that was, again, it's been a while since I've seen it, but that was more about family dynamics. Whereas with Kill List, it's just so dread-inducing, like from minute one. Like it's sort of, that's what I know what you mean by it. Yeah, it doesn't quite feel like a proper gangster film because it feels like too horrible, even when there's nothing really horrible happening. It's a strange one.
Yeah.
I was just trying to find a citation for something that I quoted a little while ago in an essay that sort of said that Ben Wheatley's films are all about the cinema of disorientation, which is for me the best description of overall his work you could give. So it's really difficult to almost separate those elements because they're set up to intentionally clash, but also weave in together as well. There's something quite magical, I think, in Kill List in the way that it does weave. I think jury's out on it, obviously, because I think a lot of people didn't feel like those elements, did quite weave. But for me, when you look back at it, they're all there the whole time. You've got this gangster. You've also got such a thread of conspiracy going through it. The whole thing is a conspiracy thriller also. So it kind of, I guess you're thinking of something closer to, Goodfellas if you were looking at a gangster movie, because you are more invested in the relationship going on. And also you're following them on this journey then.
I would say as well, though, that it does, for me, I see the dialogue that he uses as quite Cockney gangster sort of dialogue. It's almost that, and how you'd have it with, in a situation where he makes you second guess what you've just said as an answer when yeah. And it feels very intimidating. And I think that's where a part of the gangster element comes into it.
Yeah, and British gangster cinema is such a loaded concept as well, because I think around before this, really, outside of the comedy, Neil Maskell was largely doing those, I don't really know how to sort of club them together, but Cockney Geezer, Danny Dyer, that Turkish block's in a lot of them. There's lots sort of taken out in the Mediterranean, lots of drug dealing, lots of swearing, and they're all sort of the same. It plays into that a lot.
Yeah.
There's probably a term to sort of surmise what all of those are, but other than calling them geezer gangster movies, I don't really know what to call them.
Let's call them Mike Skinners.
Yeah. Essex geezer, like Cockney geezer, yeah.
Guy Ritchie knockoffs. Or...
Oh, God, yeah. I hope he's not on the list. I don't want to do his movies anytime soon. So, and the other side of that dynamic is, if it was a pure folk horror movie, does it work on that level?
Yeah.
Oh, that was short. Okay.
Next question.
I think one of the main things I've got after, I think, I dread to think how many times I've watched this movie. Like, the hours I've lost to this film, I can't even tell you. But it has witches in it, for one. It has elaborate symbols drawn on things. I mean, it starts with that symbol. That tells you what you're in for before you know what you're in for. And it's so unsettling. Just that it throws you straight into almost a kitchen sink drama straight off the back of that. It is disorientating. But I think that horror thread does come through all the way. You've got sort of, what does he say with the cat? When the cat has killed a rabbit, he says something about it being an offering.
Yeah, an offering, yeah.
The language of kind of conspiracy and horror and something supernatural, or at least something ritual, is embedded all the way through.
They sign a contract in blood, basically, when he sort of slices the hand. It's a blood pact they almost sign up to, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're all a community, they're all working together. It's classic folk horror.
Yeah, I think the thing really makes it work for me is it's never really explained, not in a sort of explicit sense.
Yeah,
we have sensations. I mean, everybody who's murdered says thank you.
Yeah,
he's handpicked for some purpose. What is his role? Who are these people? How far does that little cult? And I mean, one of the things that I don't like about folk horror is it's always a naked people cult. It's always a naked people cult. There's no imagination in these pagan societies.
Clothes are restrictive.
I appreciate it doesn't answer itself, because I think it'd struggle with like modern audiences, because I don't know whether I don't want to be one of those kids these days who don't know the Bond sort of diatribes, but at the same time, I don't think the patience is there for a movie which is so against answering any questions in any sort of meaningful way. Just as make of it what you will. And I think that's why it's 12 years later. Bloody hell, 12 years later. It still has that sort of longevity, which a lot of that sort of era of horror doesn't really, especially British horror from the sort of the early 2010s. I couldn't really name you anything else.
I think it's key with this, though, thinking about Ben Wheatley and Amy Jump's kind of commentary, is that he doesn't know either. Or at least refuses to say, and a lot of it is built on dream logic anyway, because I think there was something about his inspiration for the tunnel scene. He was like, I literally had a nightmare. I was on some kind of medication and people were chasing me through through a tunnel and they were naked and everything like that. So I think that's kind of interesting in terms of if you view Kill List as like this horrible nightmare, and particularly view it through Jay's eyes, it works on a different level. You can almost watch that film back to back and take a different character's viewpoint each time and get something slightly different out of it.
There's so much going on there as well. Taking the fact that both of them are hitmen is a thing which I didn't realise until this sort of view through, because it doesn't really sort of stand still at all. By the time things kick off, I mean, it's like, 90 minutes?
Yeah.
And it moves at a lightning pace.
It really does.
So I think you have to watch it multiple times to really appreciate it, to be honest, because there's just so much detail, so much texture. Everything is deliberate. It all feels sort of aimless and weird.
I was amazed how many sort of packed in little details. Like there's the bit where like that having a dinner and they're clinking glasses, but Jay and Shell don't clink their glass. And I think Shell pulls her glass away. So there's little things like that in pretty much every scene that, again, you could just completely miss. And it's, like you say, it's absolutely packed full of detail while also being like a coherent, enjoyable in a horrible sort of way. Horror Gangster is a folk show.
It's nasty. Yeah.
I think one of my favourite parts of Kill List that might just be throwaways when they're having dinner at the start, and she's got the table all spread out, and he's losing his mind over the fact that she hasn't put a gravy boat out, just like this Pyrex dish, because it just starts to build that tension between them, and how there's these little classist things that are clearly important to him, despite not anymore having a lot of money, and I think for me that's kind of what Kill List is about. It's Shell wanting back that status they had before. It's him potentially getting back that status that he had before if he becomes involved in this underworld. But you can take several things from it at the end, quite rightly.
Yeah, it's also about mental health as well. There's a huge, rich vein of PTSD running throughout it in Jay's character, which it reacts to it kind of funnily. I think that's the soul aspect. I don't know if I call it dated, because that's just a loaded phrase that people misuse these days, but it's just this relationship with how it reacts to PTSD. It's kind of like shrug it off and get on with it, why don't you already? Which is a bit of a decade ago stance.
Yeah, I mean, like in 2011, that was... mental health, from what I remember back then, wasn't talked about nearly as much as it is now, especially in men. So it was a kind of just carry on with your day sort of attitude. It would have happened.
And those are the people who he's surrounded by. It's not that he's, well, I don't know if you call him supported in that sense, or certainly no one, even Michael Smiley's character, they can't be fully open with each other, because there's a part of them that don't like each other. It feels like when you watch it.
Yeah, but they're also basically brothers as well. Aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it's that sort of thing. They still will hold a bit back from each other, sort of thing. So in that sense, it makes sense to me. Or certainly Jay as a character, I think he's someone who clearly holds a lot in. That's, I think, what's amazing about performances. You can just feel even when No Mask is not showing anything, you know there's like a million different emotions going on, buried underneath, just waiting to burst out, usually violently.
And bursting out is like a good choice of words, because Neil Maskell, oh wow, He's a very explosive actor, isn't he? Listen, Ball. I mean, for all intents and purposes, what I heard about him, he seems to be the loveliest guy in the world, but wow, he can tap into rage.
I've met Neil Maskell and inadvertently made a joke about threesomes, and he was totally on board with it. He's a lovely guy. He's really nice.
That's a sign of a good egg.
I think in terms of the mental health thing as well, it's probably worth bringing up that the scene where Jay goes to the doctor and he's kind of discussing things, that is based on an actual doctor's visit that Ben Wheatley had. He was struggling with depression and he went to see a doctor, and essentially I think the conversation kind of rolled around to, have you considered having an affair? and like, he was just blown away by what this doctor was suggesting, and he felt really brushed off by it. And it kind of makes its way into there. So I mean, particularly by that point of the film, you've only got to look at Jay to see that there's something very wrong. I mean, when obviously his hand is infected, and he's got the infection is actually showing on the rest of his skin. He looks like he's about to throw up all the time. Like the last third of that film, he is such an open wound of a man. Like and I think Neil Maskell is so good at that. As you say, that burst, but there's always just that tension below the surface that's like, you're never that far from it bursting. I think that comes out in his fights with Gal as well, that they will suddenly throw down and then remember who they are, and it's that perfect fight scene where they're suddenly like, not the face. And it's like this honourable thing. One of them's just smashed a mug over the other one's head, but not the face is their line. And I think that's really, weirdly, it's probably the biggest like show of their love for one another.
Yeah, it's quite sweet. Yeah, like two 6-year-olds sort of rolling around play fighting. It has that sort of feeling about it.
Yeah, play about, like, he's wrecked his jeans, and this shirt's never gonna wear this shirt again.
Oh, lots of C words thrown in there too, because this is a delightfully sweary movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, on the other side of the mental health as well, though, he does allow Shell to go for him a lot. She tells him to basically get up and get on with it. And man up, sort of thing. So he's not getting the support from her. I'm hoping that's not based on Amy. Sorry, Amy.
They're still married, so hopefully.
Well, yeah.
Miana Baring's great in this as well. Yeah.
Oh, so good.
Yeah. I think Shell's a really interesting character as well, because when we were talking about gangster movies, I mean, a huge sort of trope within gangster movies is the shutting of the door on the wife, and taking her out of it, that this is a boys' club. She's fully involved. She knows, she's handy with a gun herself.
Assistant National Service,
yeah. So it's that kind of thing. You escape that kind of sidelining of her, because she's not fully on the job, but she's fully aware of what they're doing. There's no and she is a driving force behind it as well.
She's booking the hotels for those, isn't she? Because the bit where he said, like, I booked the room for you, I don't know what it's like. But,
and the language goes further than that as well. She constantly refers to, have we been made? Do we have to move again? So she's not just the placid, put upon wife. She seems to be a gangster, not a gangster, a hitman too. Which,
well, it's weird, like her being effectively kidnapped at the end. Isn't it? It basically just hear a glass. She's shot a couple of them down. A glass smash, then he cuts to black, and you don't really know that. Obviously, you just assume they got to her somehow, but you don't see that. Next time you see it is when she's dead, basically.
Looping around the list itself is probably where the film is at its bleakest. The first one, I mean, I can't remember them entirely because it sort of breaks in the middle, but there's
I think the first one's a priest.
A librarian, and it gets a bit fuzzy then as an MP.
It's just a free, isn't it? It's just free on the list. Because the second one he goes off list because after he kills the librarian, he wants to go hunt down the guy who's filmed these horrifying videos we don't want to see, I don't think.
I mean,
you can hear them.
Yeah, that's enough. It really is. It's really distressing, actually.
Hammer scene in particular, it just shows his sort of stance to violence. I mean, it's like that bit in Evil Dead, isn't it? You can have exploding heads, you can have all sorts, but when he's battering the hell out of his hand with a hammer, it's the grisliest thing. I think I'd say. Well, it's still too much for me.
I forgot how much he whacks. I just remember the head, but I forgot he whacks his knee and his hand, and he's stabbing his ear, and he's just really brutally basically dismembering him. And obviously, this most scary thing of all is that he's just saying thank you all the way through, which is just so.
Yeah, before the other guy gets back, and I just say, I'm glad it was you. Thank you. I'm glad we got to meet. And I have no idea.
In 2011, Ben was doing something that not a lot of other films were doing, and he wasn't cutting away when it came to the worst part of the violence.
God,
and it were quite a shock because I first watched it at Fright Fest, so it were on big screen. But it were quite a shock to see that and not have a cutaway. Everyone were wincing. It's his MO entirely, isn't it? He loves it. Sadist.
Also, just Michael Smiley not reacting to it at all, really.
He's seen it. He
just wanders off upstairs, counts the money, he hears the screaming. He's just busy looking for the files.
Not this again.
You're cleaning this up.
I think can't be worse than what happened in Kiev, surely.
Maybe.
I think that's the thing, though, isn't it? Gal purely does it for the money.
Yeah.
Jay does it because he needs an outlet. Jay enjoys violence. He's very into that. Gal purely does it as a way of making money.
Well, there's a bit that Shell's talking to their son when Jay's eating the rabbit that the cat killed, and she says to the son, there's a line, she's something like, he says that the cat's giving us, doesn't think we have enough food. I just think the cat enjoys killing.
Well, some cats do. Let's be honest.
Yeah, but it's obviously a very sort of pointy thing about obviously prior to Jay, obviously.
Yeah. And back to the violence as well, there's also the other bit where he goes off script and Gal just finds him bashing that guy's head off the wall.
And he must be dead, but we don't know. He still shoots him afterwards as well, doesn't he, just to make sure?
Yeah, he shoots him to spite Gal.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing. He's just, again, it's them being really petty towards each other, because he's like, oh, you finished now? And he's like, oh, well,
I'll
do
you
this
can clean that up.
But yeah, that guy is certainly dead
Actually,
by the time they get to him.
Yeah.
It's that scene is so horrible because you've got that kettle sound, and when you lose the kettle sound, then you start to get the bangs, and you're like, oh shit, what you do? And by that point, you already know what Jay is.
Well, he's already killed a dog as well. That's just there.
He does kill
irredeemable. That, yeah.
Also, one thing I forgot is, as the way the violence is quite funny, is like after they killed the priest and they chuck the body out the window, it just lands in a slapstick comedy way.
His head bounces off the boot, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just sort of again. It is quite a funny film in places, definitely. The whole thing's almost like a really horrible, dark joke. You know,
it's a dark farce.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
So looping around, we can talk about this for a while, but we have a second movie to do too. So, Kat, is there anything that we haven't talked about with Kill List that you'd like to bring up? I'll go for everybody, but Kat first.
I think everything, trying to get it. Everyone sort of jumped on stuff. I think that we've discussed it working as a gangster film and a folk horror, but I think there is that domestic element as well. When you first, definitely on a rewatch, I forgot how much of it was about Shell and Jay initially, and them having their fights who has a massive epic fight like that at a dinner party, and then no one batters an eye and just say, oh no, yeah, this is just what they do. That's kind of how toxic is their relationship. Again, that's something that is come more to the front in recent years, but you kind of look back at that relationship now and go, is that kid safe with them?
No. Absolutely not. Faye, anything else you'd...
No, I think no. The only thing I would say is that I did read, and Caitlyn, you'll probably know more about this than I do. I think we've had this conversation before, where isn't the whole thing supposed to have an element of, is it King Arthur? King Arthur's story.
Yeah.
Because I don't know the ins and outs of it like myself.
Yeah, it's kind of not an actual identifiable Arthurian legend, but it's sort of in the same vein as that. So it's kind of almost like Jay's fantasies are of him being his son's hero instead of like, oh, he wants to, do this. And there's like one of the pets' names is like Arthur and things like that. They bring it again. It's like a low level thing, but I did go looking for what legend it would possibly be, and there isn't really one. So I think it's Ben Wheatley writing in that mold while not being strictly tied into doing an adaptation. Then, so it doesn't end up like the Green Knight in that sense that you can identify it. But yeah,
cool.
Okay, Mike, anything left? Any stone left untouched?
How much more time can you spend on it? I guess there is this sort of interesting sort of echo of like the Iraq War, sort of all the way through, sort of like how feelings about that, because the implication is they sort of worked in a similar area or in sort of a similar sort of fight, and obviously the trauma of that, I guess the unresolved trauma of that. Again, you could write books on this film. I think it is just amazing how much is packed into it.
It is indeed. And Caitlyn, any absolute stones?
Yeah, about books on it. I think the main thing for me is that Kill List is a really good introduction into how to read Ben Wheatley films, in that if you go through it searching for like a very concrete narrative in which everything is explained, you're going to come out with nothing. But I think in that discussion, a lot of what we've come up with is sensation, which I think ties directly into what he's doing 10 years later in The Earth.
Yes, quite. I don't really know what else I could add myself, so it's literally everything that we've managed to talk about. Maybe the ending, I don't know how... we've spotted pretty conclusively at this point. Is his wife in on it?
No.
Oh, I'm going to say no, but I think she's happy. It's almost like a one last "I told you so."
That's it. Yeah. But earlier in the film, she does like when she's on the phone to her mother or whoever it is. She's talking about the fact that her hometown is like falling into the sea or something. So her choice is to go home and live somewhere that's about to fall into the sea, or stay with Jay. So like at that point, both her options are probably going to kill her, because I think Jay is set up as a family annihilator anyway. That thing. I think it's very drawn from those media stories that we get of men who decide to kill their families and then themselves. I think he very much fits the mold of that. And I think that ending deliberately plays into that kind of, like Faye says, it's a really dark, I told you so. It's like, I knew it. I knew this was going to happen.
I never thought about it that way at all whatsoever. Okay. And the final thing is that MP is totally a Tory, but that's
absolutely.
Never hit.
Oh, yeah. No doubt.
Quite a good scene, isn't it? One man crazy, 3 very sane spectators. It's moving. It's alive. It's alive. It's moving. It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive. Oh, in the name of God. Now I know what it feels like to be God.
Coming up in a future episode, the first episode of season 3, to be precise, we aren't doing the random thing. because it's just not great. Too many people go missing for too long, and that's not the sort of podcast I want to run. Let's be honest. So, starting season 3, it'll be another horror director, but I guess yes and no. James Whale. Well, you could write. I think there has actually been books written about his past and his history and how he was shunned from Hollywood because of his.
So James Whale is perhaps my second favorite director of all time. Talking about camp in cinema, like, this man is the originator of camp in cinema. So he did Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein for Universal, The Old House, which was the original old creepy haunted house horror. You watch it and you're like, there's the Rocky Horror Picture Show. There's, every other haunted house film that came afterwards. He's fantastic. And, he led quite a sad life, but he's just fantastic. His films are fantastic. And the way he kind of got his actors in and knew how to direct them so they gave their best performances. It's just, I could talk about it all day, which I will.
Tell me his story. These are his memories. Can you feel him now? In the earth?
No, I don't know what you mean.
I think you do.
So what are you working on? Researching ways of making crops more efficient.
Funny place to study crops in a forest.
We had to send a rescue party in to get a group out a couple of months ago. They got lost.
Why didn't they use GPRS?
There's no phone reception in there. People get a bit funny in the woods sometimes.
You worried she's going to get you?
Yeah, who is it?
It's a local folk tale. She's the spirit of the woods.
Wake up. Something's there. Listen. Someone's watching us. I saw something in the woods. It wants to talk.
This is a complicated episode for plot synopsis because we've not went with one of his easier ones. We could have talked about Sightseers. Sightseers is an easy movie to explain. High Rise, easy. Free Fire, easy. But no, we followed one of his most complicated movies with one of his most recent movies too, which is another one where, again, I've only seen it twice, and please don't quote me on what anything is about, but In the Earth. Anybody got a synopsis for In the Earth? Because this is another doozy of a story on this one.
A scientist called Martin goes into the woods with a guide to find a fellow doctor, Dr. Wendell, he'd worked with previously. And things go wrong, similar to Kill List. They try to do one thing, and then things go wrong, and bad things happen.
Yeah. In a nutshell, it was in the neck of COVID, wasn't it? So there's implications of some disease, some illness that's going around. It's never explicitly said that it's COVID, but the implication's heavy enough for it.
Yeah, they use all the language of like lockdown. You see them using hand sanitizer, wearing masks. It's mostly in like that opening really, and stuff. It doesn't really come up as much as the film goes on because it sort of goes into a whole other.
There's a few
different territories, but yes, yeah.
Kat, what do you think of this one?
I really like In the Earth. I went to see it. I think opening night. I was sort of straight in there, and I didn't know that. I knew it had been made during the pandemic, but I didn't know it had anything to do with a pandemics type thing. And I think it was the first time outside of maybe Rob Savage's Host that I had seen the pandemic reflected on screen. And I just remember when Martin turns up and he's having to do all of like the testing and stuff, and just I think it's Alma walks in, and she's like using they're all using their elbows and the washing hands, and it made me feel really funny because it suddenly confronted me with the way that we were now living our lives, and it made me feel really, really weird. And I was kind of hooked then into what followed and all of the madness that was.
It absolutely does as well. And it's other recurring things about Ben Wheatley's filmography. He's got a returning actor in Reece Shearsmith, who complicated because I absolutely love Reece Shearsmith. And I don't know whether I'm blinded by my love for him, but as far as serial killers, he's not that bad, really.
He just wants to make pictures, like pretty photos. That's what he wants to do.
I think he's quite muted in this role. It's not as usual. I don't mean this in a bad way. It's not as usual over the top character acting. He seems, but I mean that's probably the script that he's working. That's a really good script he's working with. But I always thought it were quite on the downside for Reece. I've seen a lot of his stuff, so,
It does feel most like sort of low key, almost like realist parts because he's just sort of, especially initially, he's just sort of quite like almost hippie-ish, sort of just very laid back sort of. Again, yeah, you're right. You don't tend to. He's usually a bit more heightened and a bit more.
I think it's still manic in the role, but I think it's very much behind the eyes sort of thing rather than. Yeah, I love this role for him. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely manic in bits, though. I mean, that scene with the axe and the tours is, I don't think it'll ever not make me squirm. Really.
Again. The wind, and it sends my stomach into knots every time I see that. It just makes me tense up. And
poor Joel Fry, the stuff that Reece Shearsmith does to him.
I love Joel Fry so much. He's always so charming in everything I've seen him in. He's so just like, you can't not love him. I don't know how he does it. He's just got that just lovable hair about him.
Yeah.
Has anybody here seen Eggshells by Toby Hooper?
No.
I think it was his first film, and In the Earth reminds me a lot of that. Very much this nature taking over sort of thing. I mean, I would say check it out, but don't, because I didn't enjoy it particularly. This does it a lot better.
What's that movie a few years ago? I don't know how well received it was, but I really liked it. But The Girl with All the Gifts I thought was brilliant. And
I saw that.
That's another movie which is effectively about the next generation and nature taking back over, which I think that's a misunderstood one. Well, I'm saying that because I like it, so I'm batting for that side. But the COVID aspect is an interesting part of it as well, because the host, it's literally the whole point of it existing. But it was before it became sort of tedious, really, wasn't it? Because there's lots of movies where you can tell that they are working with the social distancing, they're working with not being able to be in the same place at the same time. And outside of that horrible nostalgia of that first sort of 15 minutes, it doesn't really feel like it's chained to that idea too much.
No, although there's a really conversation I forget related to both where Alma and Martin talk about, like, will people forget this? Will people just move on? Which is very strange to watch 2 years later. I was like, will people talk about we're in a post-COVID society? Which, arguably we aren't, because it's still around, but it's interesting. It's an interesting discussion to have, and that's quite early, when it was still a big thing, that it was still lockdowns and things when that came out. To have that conversation in there is really interesting to watch now.
Because that was the sort of the genesis to words. That was the genesis behind it happening, really, wasn't it? He just wanted to get out there and make a movie. Mm-hmm. So he got a few of his. I don't know whether the friends. I'm assuming he's friends with Reece Shearsmith, because I like to think everybody is. And he just went out in the woods and made something.
He'd worked with Hayley Squires before on Colin Burstead and me as well. So so definitely need those two at least.
Was that before this or after this?
I think that was just before.
Yeah, Colin Burstead's a couple of years old.
Yeah, that's an underrated one, I think.
It's really good.
Yeah. But I don't know if this is an odd take, but this totally feels like a Peter Strickland movie. I'm going to have to back that statement up a little bit, I think. But with Peter Strickland movies, he has an element of kind of everything being thrown to the surreal aspect of it. We have this story. It's a pretty straightforward story. Take, for example, it's a kindly English guy who's doing sound design for a Jello, and slowly by slowly, bit by bit, his psyche is fractured away, and then it ends with this sort of phantasmagorical nightmare, weird edited storm of just a flurry of images, and that's exactly what happens here too. So it does have a feeling of Peter Strickland, and I think we mentioned earlier, there's not many horror directors, even though it's debatable calling either of them horror directors because they're so versatile and do so many things, but them two are the ones that really escaped that era, sort of elevating British horror to the next level, I think, both Ben Wheatley and Peter Strickland. So there's a lot in common between the two of them, I think.
Because I think, is it Rook Films? I think they've actually, which is Ben Wheatley's company. I think they've even produced a couple of Ben Wheatley films or been involved in them as well. So I think they've certainly. I mean, I'd be surprised if they don't know each other or haven't influenced each other in some way.
They've got a like link between using traditionally like British comic actors as well.
Yeah.
So you've got kind of traditionally British comic actors that you'll have seen in various comedy things, sketch comedy. All of those kind of things brought in to really deliver on the horror elements.
Absolutely. Joe Fry in particular, he's done a lot of comedy stuff. I don't think this comedy stuff he did was great. It was what was that ITV2 one called?
Plebs.
Isn't that Flag Means Death now? Which I think that's probably and Cruella as well. That's so his stars are rising.
Yeah, but it's such an odd movie in the.
It's really trippy.
Yeah, it's exactly the same in Kill List in the sense of I don't think it's possible to get everything out of this in one or two viewings, and I don't think it really wants you to because there's so many clues. It plays into sort of folk horror history and mythological history of the idea where it used to be in the old world where people didn't understand it, so it's a god that did that. It's the sun's not a sun, it's something that provides us warmth and heat and sustenance. It's a god. It plays into that sort of idea of ancient folklore and ancient mythology, but it's also sort of a weird electronic music in the woods movie.
What I find really interesting about it is that it's a movie about the first viral text. So Hammer of the Witches is the first text to actually go viral in the way that we would think about it now. It almost takes on a meme style quality for hunting witches. And now you have a pandemic movie discussing that.
If you've not seen, it's a Czech movie, which I don't think anybody really talks about, called Witch Hammer, which is about that book. Very intense, a day ruiner, one of those. But it's a great movie. And it's just such a medley of things, really, this. Does it work? Because there's so many ideas, there's so many different genres, there's so many different styles, there's so many different messages and theories, and is it too much?
I'm going to say no, because like what you guys have taken from it, I didn't take that on first viewing. In my mind, it was, is this thing real or not? And is it that they have, for example, obviously because it's set in the pandemic or, some sort of pandemic, it could have been a case that that's allowed certain parts of nature to grow where they wouldn't have grown before, where they wouldn't have been polluted. Has that now developed a plant that is making them hallucinate? And that's what I took from it, which is well different from what anyone else is saying here. So I kind of like that it's layered, because you do have to go back and watch it again, and that's when you start to pick up on the things that you missed the first time. So I kind of like that it's a bit more complex than usual folk horror.
Yeah. The Byproduct of that, I think it's probably one of his most hated movies from the people who don't like it. It's really, really disliked. I'm not sure why, I'll be honest.
I'm going to be that person and be like, so much of, I think, mainstream film in particular wants to spoon feed an awful lot and wants you to have long parasocial relationships with characters and scenarios. You could say I'm talking about Marvel. You might not. But like, that is the bulk of your box office take-ins, right? you're not getting many of these like one-shot films. You could apply the same to horror. I mean, I love the Scream franchise, but it's still inviting that same thing of come back and see these guys again, come back and do this and continue this relationship. And I don't think we get a lot of films that are just one and dones, that are not easily spoon-fed to people and that don't have, I don't know. I think this does have an uplifting ending. I think it does. But I think it's not as cut and dried, and it's certainly unpleasant and confrontational in its style getting there.
Yes.
And I think that understandably turns a lot of people off.
Yeah. It's also funny as well, which I think might be me string too far for some people. Well, I find it funny anyway.
It is funny.
The axe foot scene is funny.
It's hilarious. It's just I'm fine as I am, really. I'm absolutely fine.
Well, when I was thinking funny, I was thinking of the tent peg. But
yeah.
Oh, tent peg, Jesus.
Especially just get a fleeting shot of it actually going in the eye as well. It's like it's almost subliminal shots.
It's so gruesome.
Yeah.
Do you know,
and he just goes like, "Oh no, I'm definitely going to have to go to the hospital."
Do you know, I've even managed to over-intellectualize that moment because I watched it last night. I rewatched it again. And, you know, like I was saying about how Ben Wheatley is never going to show you the meaning entirely. I kind of feel like that moment is almost Ben Wheatley talking about that. I think In the Earth is the first time he says it out loud in terms of like, I'm not going to give you all the answers. There's loads going on here, but if you're searching for meaning, you're going to find whatever you're looking for. So you end up with Parnag Feg, which is Spirit of the Woods in this. And I think it's really interesting that obviously the tent peg has gone into his brain and made him a bit like he's on the downswing. And that could account for him talking nonsense. But also, he doesn't fully admit his fate until he looks in the mirror and sees it directly, reflected back at him exactly what the situation is. And then he has the realization of, no, you're going to have to take me to hospital. I think that's a weird little meta moment of like people not accepting something until they can see it fully fleshed out.
Have you done a paper on this yet, Caitlin?
I've done one. I've done one so far, but yeah, I think that's the thing. It's a really interesting, like, confrontational moment because why else is it there? Yeah, it gets a laugh, and it sort of allows a pause for her to kick it further in. But like, I just think there's so much meaning about the absence of meaning and what that does to people.
Yeah,
and I certainly think that's based on like 10 years of reception to Kill List and people still arguing about what happened or not.
Or filmed in England, even High Rise to a degree, you know.
Yeah.
People argue about High Rise.
Well, maybe not like meaning.
High Rise.
You know, I think that was also a divisive movie, wasn't it? I think maybe not in terms of its meaning, I guess, but
I think the difficulty with High Rise is everyone still considered it to be the unfilmable novel, and to some point it is. My favorite scene from the book didn't make it into the film. You know, that's fine, but I'm a weirdo and no one else would have wanted to see that. So
what was the bit?
It's just a tiny thing. There's like a reporter in the novel, and at some point she's been holed up for a while and she's kind of just wasting away on the bed, and sorry, this is quite graphic. A cat is kind of eating away at her wrist sinews. And I just thought, that's such a Wheatley image, isn't it?
If you want to feel a little less weird, I will say that my favourite part of American Psycho didn't make it into the film either.
Oh, not the rats.
Yeah, the rats.
Oh, no. That book had to go down for 2 weeks, back on the shelf, closed, faced away from me after that.
It would have been an interesting visual, I think. I would have been interested to see how they did it. Not to say I want it to happen, obviously.
Prison.
To wrap up on In the Earth, Kat, is there anything that we haven't brought up that you'd like to discuss about the movie?
Well, I think we've kind of touched on that this, much like Kill List, is almost like a sensory viewing experience. But I think that something that In the Earth does really well is it really does show Wheatley's talent across the board. You know, he also served as editor on this, and why this film wasn't in contention for at least like BIFFAs and BAFTAs and stuff for the end edit sequence alone. I mean, how long did that take to cut all of those flashes together? I mean, like flashing back to my own sort of foray into editing at uni, and I had to edit a clip that was like a minute long, and it took me fucking forever. So, hats off to him. But it's because of the pandemic filming, he had to take on a lot more responsibility. And I think this film is a testament to his talent, not just as a writer and a director, but in the other positions as well.
Well said.
Because he's the only credited writer, isn't he? I don't think there's a...
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, Amy Jump isn't credited on this one other than as a producer.
Yeah.
That's a change from the... I don't know. I know Sightseers was written by Steve Oram and...
Alice Law.
Alice Law. Alice Law's great. But beyond that, I think it's mainly them two, isn't it? So this is a real change. Pure blood writer. Faye, anything else?
No, just other than to mention the amazing effects throughout this film, which I'm assuming are pretty much all practical. They look fantastic and never fail to just make me want to gip because they're so horrible.
The toe bit especially. And the sewing.
Yeah.
Oh, it's horrid.
It's just the treading on something. We've all trod on something. I mean, I'm a mother of a toddler. I'm always treading on fucking Lego. And you can put yourself in his feet, and if something's gone in, it's got to come out, or it's got to get dealt with. And it's that relatable way. Okay, the hammer in Kill List out, no, but there's not many of us that have been bludgeoned with a hammer, but we have all trod on something that we don't want to.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's Dan Martin because he does horribly disgusting. This is a phrase. Skin flaps. He does horribly disgusting skin flaps.
Yes.
It's a sentence that taken out of context, but
I've written quite a bit on the yonic symbolism of this film, the yonic and phallic symbolism. And yes, I did have to look up yonic because I knew phallic, but I didn't know the other end. But, now I do, and now you do.
Mike.
Follow that up.
Follow that up.
Just on the foot, I just feel so bad. He cuts it cut, stitches it, amputated, and cauterized. Paul Martin. It's interesting to watch this with Kill List because it's a similar film of arguably these two people who are caught in a machine. They're like basically subjects of this couple's experiments, which is interesting. It's a bit more like languorous. Like it feels a bit more like it's not quite as like fast paced and or at least not until like for certain sequences. A lot of it is all quite sort of gradual and atmospheric compared to Kill List. But I remember watching in the cinema, it was a full on proper. I remember him saying that in interviews that this is like one of the first films coming after, like you could go back into cinemas, and he wanted to make the most of it being a cinematic experience. It's like incentive to go in, and it definitely was, and it still works as a home at home. And Kat's right about the the editing. Editing across the board is but particularly those surreal imagery. It's so overwhelming in a really interesting way.
That's the scenes play out, doesn't he? Sorry. Kat, you were saying?
I was going to say the sound design was ridiculous in my cinema. Like my seat was vibrating and stuff. And I remember coming out because I think it was a summertime that it was released. So I was walking home from my cinema and I was in a bit of a daze, like for like half of the journey home because the music, and I'd been so absorbed through this sound design into the film that it was a really trippy experience.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not many of those movies. I can't remember what it was. It was a Ken Russell movie with the sensory deprivation tank. I can't remember the name of the...
Altered States?
Altered States, yes. Like when you finish watching it and you just sort of come back into normal reality. It's so mind-boggling. One of the things I'm really envious of not being able to see it in the cinema, because I think that's one of those feelings that you really want in a movie where you just feel like you come back down to earth. Nothing makes sense because you're sort of being trapped in the logic of this weird little movie for 2 hours or so.
Yeah, and one good thing they did in the cinemas is they gave a warning about strobe lighting as well, because it does get very intense. And I remember they had that in the cinema. There's like in red text, which is good that they did that, because it does get, if you're sensitive to that, it does get very intense. Like action.
It does indeed. And Caitlyn, anything else about In the Earth?
How long have you got? Again, my point is it goes back to the editing, because I think what's really interesting is you have those two kind of trippy sequences towards the end. And the first one where she's put in the suit and sent in, it feels like an assault, right? And then the second one is a conversation. And I think there's some kind of alchemy in that he's been able to convey that using a lot of the same imagery, but the tone has changed. It's a conversation, and it's welcoming. Weirdly, it's still like confrontational, but it feels very different to the earlier sequence, and incredible stuff.
So do we think there is a spirit? Do you think she is communing with something, or is it just?
Well, it's such a weird thing, isn't it? One of them's basically had too many ayahuasca trips.
Yeah.
And the other one's trying to talk to the forest through electronic music.
Yeah.
It's
interesting that Alma, the one because Martin is being used as this vessel, but it's Alma who seems to be the most in tune. And like the last line is saying, "Let me guide you out of the forest." You know, it's the idea of she is the one who had the connection.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, which forest was it shot in?
Ooh, I don't know.
Oh, he said during his Q&A, and I cannot remember for the life of me what it is now.
It's not important. It's just sort of out of curiosity.
The one thing I didn't know.
Kill List was shot through Screen, Yorkshire. So
that was actually in Sheffield. Kill List. There's a lot of places I know from Kill List. As I was sat there watching it, going, "Oh, I work there. Oh my god, I like that." But yeah, it was all over there. No, I'm not sure about the forest, unfortunately.
There's already like a family that are just camping in there as well, who are presumably killed by Ray Shearsmith.
I know it was the pandemic, but going camping in forests like that is insane.
What was the thinking?
I mean, the fact that he has to walk for 2 days straight.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, nobody is rocking up at Centre Parks thinking they're going to get the foot chopped off, are they? It's not the family's fault.
It doesn't look like it's
Depends on the Centre Parks you go to, honestly.
Well,
some of them get a bit nuts.
If we share switch there, run.
No.
Be worth it.
Yep.
So, to wrap up, 2 final questions. Let's just assume it's not going to happen. He's got many years left in the tank, I think. But let's just assume that Ben Wheatley retired today. Has he left a good back catalogue behind? And yeah, I mean, that's essentially it. And is there any other highlights besides his work that we talked about today that really stand out from his work? So, Kat?
I think if he was to retire now, then yeah, he's got an excellent back catalogue. It's got a lot of variety to it. I think something that we haven't spoken about too much, Sightseers is a great film, very different to these 2 films, much more into the relationship dynamics and comedy. It's more of a straight comedy, as straight as it would get for a Wheatley film. So that's another personal favourite of mine.
Fair.
Absolutely. There'd be no argument from me on that. I think he deals with different types of film very well, not necessarily genres, but you know, it's always a different style when he goes into it, while still having a Wheatley signature. Especially, I think you're talking about it later, A Field in England. I think it's very brave to take something like that and go back to that old worldy kind of setting and make it something completely terrifying, and at the same time have a really good shoot up film in Free Fire. I think it's fantastic in everything he does.
Yeah, people don't talk about Free Fire enough. I think it's another misunderstood. Just Tom Davis in there. There's just so many great British comedic actors that he's worked with over the years. Absolutely. Mike.
I was going to mention Free Fire because I think it's got that sort of anarchic comedy while also just he's very good. I think I know with that film he talked about he'd seen like superhero films and he was sick of just seeing like giant buildings fall down and feeling nothing. So he wanted to do stuff about, you know, like if you jam your finger in the door or whatever he wanted. And that does sum up his approach to like violence, I think. And I think he's, in terms of his back catalogue, you can see that in like almost every film of like, you get those moments where you just go, ooh, you get those moments where you just sort of wince and you just go like, oh, you can really feel it. I don't know how he does that. I guess it's just a really useful practical
cast in that movie as well. It was just
he's got his big high glossy films like Rebecca, High Rise, where he's got his big all-star cast, but he can also still do these little indie films. So like his next film's The Meg 2, which is going to be, I imagine it's going to be completely different to in the and he'll do like, you know, almost like higher jobs on like Doctor Who or whatever. So he's in terms of his back catalogue, there's at the very least you'll always be entertained, and chances are there'll be like stuff under the surface you can dive into as well.
Okay, so Caitlyn.
Yeah, I think if you left his back catalogue as it is today, you'd have kind of this merge of genres, styles, and everything like that. But as everyone has kind of touched on, that Ben Wheatley stamp that does something, whether that's with all the artists he collaborates with or not. And I know there was something on the Sightseers extras that was like, this isn't my film, it's not my characters, but I'm drawn to it. And perhaps that's the kind of almost more of an explanation of like auteur theory then, is that even when it's not their own, those are the stories they're drawn to tell, and to tell in a specific way. And I think he certainly does that.
And just to add to what everybody's been saying, the thing that always really stuck out for me with Ben Wheatley is he gave me hope for British cinema. I know that's a very grand statement, but for the past, I'd say, I don't know how long it's been, to be honest, it felt like British cinema was very sort of upper middle class or misery porn. There was no real sort of nuance. There was no variation. There was nobody doing anything different. Things that made, this is a British film and I'm proud of this movie. It was all just BAFTA fodder, for want of a better word, really. And Ben Wheatley, I mean, there's been other people. I mean, Shane Meadows, I thought he was one because he came out with Dead Man's Shoes, which is a horrifying movie, but I don't know what happened there, but Ben Wheatley has stayed the course. He's been this real champion for independent, intelligent genre movie making, which is fiercely British. And there's nobody else that really constantly does that because they're all, I know it's kind of hard to say that when he's making The Meg 2, but he's never really abandoned British cinema. And that means a lot to me, honestly.
We need a Shane Meadows, Ben Wheatley crossover collaboration, sorry. Could you imagine the misery in that film?
So
I'm here for it.
The second part of that question is more sort of the second part of the to wrap up here is more sort of what you want to see from the future, what you think he's got up his sleeve going forward. And I'll just preface it all by it better be Freak Shift because you can't set up that and then just never do it again. Kat, future for Ben Wheatley, what do you see?
I just want to see The Meg 2. I'm not, I will watch whatever else he goes on to make, but I just want to see what he can do with a giant shark and Jason Statham. There's just when he was announced as the director for the project, my mind sort of exploded a little bit because they couldn't marry the two together. But I'm very, very excited to see what happens with this film. I was a bit lukewarm on the first Meg, but I'm all in on seeing what chaos ensues now.
Faye?
I'd like some TV stuff from Ben. I'd like him to do like a far shorter version of like a messed up Tales of the Unexpected, like Ben Wheatley style.
Yeah, he has kind of a role like I'm forgetting names here. Jordan Peele. He's kind of our Jordan Peele, really, isn't he?
Yeah.
Like a Ben Wheatley's Twilight Zone.
Oh my goodness. I'm surprised he hasn't directed
Which essentially is Tales of the Unexpected.
Yeah. I'm surprised Reece Shearsmith hasn't got him to do a Inside Number 9 at this point.
That would be cool.
It is a bit their baby, though, isn't it?
I guess so. We don't direct it, though. They get directors it. Get Ben Wheatley to do one.
I mean, no, it's not in my headcanon. My headcanon is either of them direct every single episode.
I don't know if like 10 o'clock BBC 2 is ready for Ben Wheatley, if I'm honest.
No, that's fair.
Like, you know, it might be a bit too much even for that audience.
Yeah.
Especially these days, yeah. Mike?
I guess whatever he wants to do next, because actually you do get the feeling that he doesn't compromise, or like in terms of his like vision, or he makes what he wants to make. It feels like, although I guess it's just that he hasn't done a sequel except for The Meg 2, which is a sequel to a film he didn't direct. I guess so. I guess he still hasn't done a sequel. Technically,
he was for a while. He was linked to Tomb Raider 2 as well, wasn't he? But
he was, yeah. So yeah, as long as he just keeps making keeps making stuff. I'll go see whatever he does. Really,
it seems active, very active. Because on the Kill List that DVD, he says after Down Terrace, he didn't want to be in a position where a producer or whoever said, "What have you got next?" So he has like 8 scripts or so. I think Neil Maskell said it as.
Yeah,
but he's always busy, always active.
Yeah, I think
being married to your co-writer as well. That makes it much easier.
Yeah, again, I think it's partly what he wants to do in the Earth because lockdown, and I think those projects falling through like Tomb Raider probably made him like, I just want to go out and make something, and he just did it and still made a great film. So I think that's part of my appeal towards him is he could sort of make something out of nothing, really, like on the lowest budget or the Meg 2.
Well, I mentioned him earlier, Ken Russell. He basically ended up making movies in his backyard because nobody had given money, and there's a feeling of that to Ben Wheatley too, I think. I don't think it's going to go badly wrong for him. He's too talented. But if it does, I think he still would just go out with his mates and just make some stuff.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. See how the Meg 2 does, I guess.
Well, yeah, Hollywood can ruin careers, can't it? It's a real mean mistress, that one. And Caitlyn?
Yeah, I think I kind of almost see him as doing maybe one for them, one for me type of thing. So like Rebecca, that film feels like there's a bigger Wheatley film just straining underneath, trying to get out. And I think that's maybe the thing where when you give someone a lot of money, but you want a certain thing done and you've got certain points to deliver, because obviously with streaming, it's like, what was it said this week that you've got 30 seconds and people switch off? Like, that's not a Wheatley kind of, that's not going to be how he works. So I can kind of foresee him as maybe doing bigger projects as kind of a safe pair of hands. So yeah, I'm excited for the Meg 2. Just put it out there. Cannot wait. But I think it's going to be more about him proving himself as a safe pair of hands, that he can deliver that project, and then using the kind of money from that to maybe go back and do a smaller budget, more Wheatley film.
I'd like to think that too. Yeah. So, final question, I'm going to put you all on the spot. What's your favourite Ben Wheatley? You're all thinking. That's not quick enough.
I'm not thinking. I'm just waiting my turn.
Kat, favourite?
I think purely based on my first viewing experience, I'm going to go with In the Earth, because that film messed me up something chronic in the cinema.
Pretty envious. I mean, that sound mix alone, it'd be quite something in the cinema. Fair.
Kill List. Always Kill List.
No hesitation whatsoever.
No.
Okay. Mike?
Probably Kill List as well. Although I think Free Fire is it's probably the most fun.
Yes. Yeah, that's a fair statement, yeah. And Caitlyn?
It's like choosing between children, isn't it? If I had him. I think it probably is Kill List, actually. I don't think you can forget that initial impact.
Yeah, I remember seeing that in Tyneside Cinema up in Newcastle, and I just did not know what I'd seen. So, yeah. You don't forget things like that. First viewings like that, you just don't forget.
I walked out into Cardiff Mardi Gras and still felt like I was under attack. It's like the biggest clash. Yeah.
Story trumps. Yeah, you got that one there. Okay. So where can we find you all online, Kat?
I am on Letterboxd, Instagram, and Twitter at Gizmo Shikari, and there's links to all of my writing on there.
Excellent. Fair.
I am Tweak81 on Twitter. I don't do Instagram. I've got 3 accounts. I never use them. And I've also got a podcast at I Spit on Your Grades, or Spit Grades, at Spit Grades on Twitter.
Mike?
You probably find me best on Twitter. I am on Instagram, at Autistic Horror. And I put stuff on the blog there, and also write stuff for the Geek Show as well.
And Caitlyn?
The main site is at scaredsheepless.com. I'm on Twitter at scaredsheepless, Instagram at scaredsheeplessblog, and they've all got link trees to my stuff for Ghouls and Horrified as well.
Yes, and the links to all of that will be in the description below, whether you see this on your podcast feed. And if you see it on your podcast feed, please do give it a rating and a review. I don't feel like I say that enough because I had a clip from I can't remember what movie it was. In the disappearance, what's it called? Well, basically, what I'm saying is, there's a movie where David Cronenberg said it, and I'm thinking of just taking that and putting it at the end of every episode. The disappearance of it was a Canadian movie. He was a local history podcaster.
Disappearance at Clifton Hill.
Yes, there we go. Just take a clip from that. He's a podcaster and that'll do.
Yeah. In a UFO diner.
Yeah, it's Big Dave. Big Dave's great.
I'm looking up.
Yeah. So that wraps us up for season 2. Please do follow me on social media at OneCutRobcast across all of them, where there'll be announcements about what's happening with season 3 because there's a big change afoot. The name for one will be going to the podcast Heaven in the Sky, but there'll be a little mini episode that'll be dropping in the feed maybe in the next few days to explain what's happening. So until then, I guess that's it for Directors Uncut. Forever, it's done, it's finished. And from its corpse, a new thing will climb. And I probably could have had a metaphor here for one of these movies that we've talked about, but I didn't plan that far in advance. But yes, until next time, thanks for listening.